Welcome to the Requel Podcast. I am Tyler, and it's time to talk Spider-Man. That's right, there's been some talk with Spider-Man 4. And not too long ago, the supposed leaked script of what would have been Avengers King Dynasty came out. And it had some interesting things in it. And it makes me wonder if this would have taken place after Spider-Man 4, or what the plan was, as Spider-Man plays a large part of the film. But I got cracking talking with Solomon about the MCU, and just thinking about, they announced they're supposed to be doing Spider-Man 4. And the cool thing about Spider-Man 4 is it kind of is a reboot, even soft reboot, in the sense that it's continuation of the Tom Holland Peter Parker. But what it does is it steps him outside of the Avengers, outside of Tony Stark, moving him away from basically the world they built in those other three films. He is now on his own and technically forgotten. So it gives him a place to really start anew. So here goes my pitch. We skipped forward a few years, or a year or two, from the last movie. Now I have to sit back, do the math, and kind of see where we are in the Marvel timeline. But Peter got his GED because he didn't exist, and got some scholarships and applied for it and everything. And he is going to Empire State. There he meets Gwen Stacy, Felicia Harding, and one that we're toying with but could not be is Miles Morales. And a lot of things they've started to really shrink that window of gap between Peter and Miles. Used to be it was Peter's an adult, Miles was the child. Now they kind of shrunk it down to where Peter's only maybe a couple of years older than Miles. And this is kind of more for Solomon because he really wants Miles. But my thought is we haven't even got the third Spider-Verse movie, which makes no sense. I figure Sony would be working very hard at getting that out because it was supposed to be a back-to-back kind of thing. And I really wouldn't want to see live-action Miles until we got the third Spider-Verse movie. But anyways, the villain, I think Black Cat would be fun to start teasing and having there. I think seeing Peter trying to, do pictures of Spider-Man and trying to sell something to the Daily Bugle would be great also. And we hear the name Eddie Brock. We don't see Brock yet, but we'll have a scene of, get me Brock. Where's Brock? Has anyone seen Brock in the film? Okay. Villain-wise, I think it would be great to have Tombstone as kind of this coming up boss. And we would hear rumblings like in the background of the media, because we're in the newspaper, which makes it fun because being at the newspaper for the Daily Planet is we can throw in all the other Marvel Easter eggs and references we want, and it makes sense. It can be like your news hub, right? So we can hear about Kingpin battles Daredevil or something like that, keeping the world connected, right? But setting Peter's new sidecast. Now, the main villain, as I ask the question, is what happens to Ned when there is no Peter? So Ned and Peter were best friends. Ned doesn't have Peter. He doesn't have a best friend. So really, the idea that Peter was his guiding conscience and Ned goes into a dark place and starts to become something else and builds and becomes the Hobgoblin. That would be something very interesting to see. And the idea that Peter, by doing what he did, which was he's so noble and everything, but you have Ned at MIT who basically becomes the Hobgoblin. And that's your big antagonist. Now, while at Empire State, Peter meets Harry Osborn and starts to form a new friendship that kind of mirrors him and Ned's. But he's a leery because the idea of Norman. Now, we don't meet Norman, we just hear about Norman. The other thing is we meet professors of Peter's, which would be in this world, Kurt Connors and Olivia Octavius. Differentiating from the other world, but also Peter knowing that in other worlds these are villains and makes him feel uncomfortable. The biggest thing with Spider-Man 4 is between No Way Home, the previous incarnations, and then what Sony has done, getting Spider-Man clean with new antagonists is difficult. But I think the story thread is there to be very strong between the idea of what happened to Ned without Peter and making Peter guilty for creating his best friend as a villain and feeling responsible for that. Now, we thought, Solomon and I, through our discussion about the idea of what if you posed the black suit, because we know that a piece of the original Tom Hardy Venom was left in the MCU world. But I feel like that would be towards the end of the movie, that at the very end of the movie, you have the Venom symbiote coming to the Daily Bugle, having some knowledge of Eddie, looking for Eddie, but then finds Peter there. And at the very end, you see the black covering Peter. Then, credits, blah, blah, post-credit scene. Peter's at home, boom, busts in his dorm room. It's Doctor Strange. And Doctor Strange comes in and says, Peter. And Peter listens and says, I remember you're Spider-Man. I know who you are and what you did. And we find out basically that Doctor Strange kept a backdoor remembrance of Peter. And then he says, I need your help. There's a war coming. And then Peter says, count me in. Then all of a sudden we see the black costume form on Peter. Done. Secret Wars.